We welcome in ESPN front office NBA insider with over 20 years of front office experience in the NBA. You can find him on X at BobbyMarks42. He is friend of the Dallas Mavs podcast. Bobby Marks, how are you? Good to see you.
Bobby.
I'm good, guys. How we doing?
Well, not hot as of the moment. Your colleague, Shams Charania, breaking the news that Anthony Davis is going to have ligament surgery to repair the damage in his left hand. I'm going to ask you to do the impossible here. I dropped Bobby Marks in the middle of the Dallas Mavericks in this situation. How is he handling this 23 days before the NBA trade deadline with respect to Anthony Davis?
Well, I mean, I think probably what you were looking to try to get back before the injury certainly changes, I would think. I think that it's a matter of, do you want to hold on to him after the trade deadline, thinking that his value in the offseason will get better? Or is there, if it was me, I would be looking at a deal just to try to get off his money. And I know that will probably not sound right for Mavericks fans who, considering what you had to give up to get him. But I do think where they are financially next year, they're in a terrible position next year financially, worse than right now, because they are a second apron team next year. Second apron teams and lottery teams really don't go hand in hand here, and you're going to get a high draft pick here. So if I was in Dallas, I would be looking at deals where I am looking at expiring contracts, whether it be a team like Chicago. Is it, I heard you guys mention Toronto. I mean, what are you getting back in Toronto? I don't know if I want that Jakob Poeltl contract, because that thing is not aging very well because he can't get on the court. But yeah, I do think I'm still looking at deals here, but I do think you just have to balance if it's worth holding him on to into the offseason here. I do think the one thing that you're going to run into an issue is what is the number on an extension for him, not in Dallas, but with another team. Or I was hearing you guys, or maybe that doesn't even matter to this point, where you're just taking Davis back on for the remainder of this year where he's hurt, and then next year, and then see what he does with that player option. He's eligible for 275, but that doesn't mean he's going to get that in his next contract.
I think Toronto's interesting. I'm glad you brought them up. I mean, there definitely is a framework of Quickly and Poeltl, as you mentioned, but those are both longer contracts with more money. I would say both contracts are a little bit underwater. Not that those two players are not good players, just that they're paid more. Is that a scenario where maybe you could even get a first-round pick out of it? Because in a way, you would be taking on more money. You would just be splitting it up. And hopefully, that you can find use or repackage those players going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, I guess. I know I've used the Brandon Ingram situation a little bit here, but Ingram gets traded from New Orleans to Toronto. Probably less of players of value. It was really just the expiring contract of Bruce Brown, and then I think Olynyk was part of that. And you got a first out of the deal with New Orleans here. I think teams. And if you think you can get AD back playoff time, or maybe you can get into a second round here, then I think that gives you tremendous value. As I said, the Poeltl contract, the extension doesn't kick in yet. It goes from like 19 to like 27, 28. I know that last year, and there's I think there's a partial there. So yeah, that's something that you would certainly want to look at if you're content as far as where you are money wise. If ownership is content paying a big luxury tax bill and being in the second apron next year, then you're probably looking at trying to get back players that can help you win, because eventually you're going to get Kyrie back. And so you'll have the nucleus with Kyrie and Cooper. You'll have a good draft pick, and you still have some really good complementary players here to be competitive. It's hard, guys, and you've seen this. It's hard when you bottom out, really, and say, you know what, we're going to build around Cooper and our pick in the lottery here, unless you do it the right way at where the Western Conference is.
And that's like the Poeltl and the Quickly framework. Even in that theoretical idea, that will not help Dallas with the second apron. That would have to come from
right.
somewhere else. And you just talked about it. It's tricky. Like, Kyrie's coming back. They don't own their pick next year. They're not trying to bottom out so badly that they can't compete next year. If you were the GM and you look at this roster, outside of AD, which veterans are you looking at to both reduce what is going to be on the books next year, and then also just like who is tradable, who has value down roster from Anthony Davis?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would probably try to get off Klay's money. I think that would be something that you want to do. It's interesting, this Dallas team went from a team that was pretty top heavy with bigs, with AD and Gafford and Lively, and now 2 out of the 3 are hurt. And we've certainly heard Daniel Gafford's name mentioned in rumors, but I would be a little bit hesitant unless something of value I'm getting back, because you trade him, now you have nothing.
Starting center Dwight Powell. Some things never change.
Because you do need to have things. It's similar to what kind of Boston is going through, or Indiana. You do need things roster wise when these guys come back, when Kyrie come back, if he's still part of what you're trying to do, as far as from a roster standpoint here. But yeah, I mean, PJ can't get traded because he's on the extension. Of course, Cooper, you're not going to do. You're going to need to open up a roster spot to convert Nemhard, who's on a 2-way. Probably will come at the cost of Exum, who's out for the rest of the year here. But I think it's kind of balancing like what makes sense right now and what makes sense next year, and what your roster is going to look like after you do that deal. And if it's Gafford, who probably has really good value, I would think, just for teams, if you're Atlanta looking for big, or if you're Indiana looking for big, he would be the guy that you would want.
So when you look at Anthony Davis's market, what have you been hearing about what his market value is relative to prior to the injury and now with the injury, and how that sets up for him and his potential trade stock going forward here, whether it be at the trade deadline or going into the offseason?
When I talk to teams about AD, the one question they always ask me is, what's the number going to be? What's the number going to be on an extension? That's concern. I know certainly Atlanta had been linked to him, and now it would have made more sense now that you don't have the Trae Young money off your books for next year, but you still got to send out $50 million in an AD trade and stay under the luxury tax if you're the Hawks here. And I don't see that as I don't know if it's a realistic option, but I think it would be less likely here. But I would say, listen, we're in a marketplace where you saw what Trae Young went for. Ja Morant will probably go for the same that Trae Young went for if he is traded. Expiring contracts here. I think if you're, as I said, the market for AD is probably, if it's a rebuilding team, it's more about next year. It's not about this year, but it all comes back to what's the number on an extension. What are we comfortable paying a 33-year-old in the long-term future? And I think that's what teams are kind of held up on.
And then just since Rich Paul is Anthony Davis's agent, in these type of situations, kind of from your point of view, from being a former front office member, how much power does the agent have in these negotiations? Is Rich Paul also looking for teams that would possibly take Anthony Davis and his contract number?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an era where, with David Falk and, the big time agents, where they basically controlled the marketplace as far as dictating where players went. And I think Rich is as good as any agent out there, and he's looking for the best interest in his client. I think the AD situation is a little bit trickier than maybe De'Aaron Fox a year ago. De'Aaron Fox is in the prime of his career, and San Antonio needed a lead guard to add with Victor. Where AD is right now, and especially when you take into consideration his injury history and his age, I don't know if you can control the narrative as far as trying to get him to a place, or maybe saying if he's traded to this place, we're not going to sign a long-term extension. I think that's usually how it works, is if he's traded to hypothetically, let's say Sacramento. Well, we're just going to play out the year, and we're going to enter free agency in 2027. That's a little bit more challenging, I think, when it comes with AD. But I do think if with Rich talking to team, he's going to want to know, is there an extension in place this summer when he's eligible to do that? What's the plan moving forward here? What does the roster look like? And as you guys know, when you take on a $54 to $58 million salary in this day and age, it becomes very challenging as far as what you can add around that player.
Bobby, we're not even a year to the NBA, the trade between Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis. As you have watched this play out over the last near year, is this a cautionary tale? How would you describe the last year with how these two teams, particularly obviously the Mavericks with the Anthony Davis situation, and how things will look forward when it comes to trades like this, if we see such trades like that again?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a cautionary tale on a lot of things here. I was in the Brooklyn front office when we did the Boston trade, and I don't want to equate it to the AD Luka trade here, but what happens is that, especially when you have a shift, when you fire Nico and now you have a different, you still have some of the, with Matt and Michael in there and stuff, but you're looking at it in a different direction where maybe, when you make that trade, the goal was that AD was going to be part of your future and you were going to build around him and Kyrie. And then, now you get Cooper and moving forward. And then when you shift that and you change plans, which certainly looks like what Dallas is doing here. Yeah, that's the cautionary tale when you're basically giving up a franchise player in Luka. And then all of a sudden, a year later, you're looking to trade that same player back, and then you'll be left with Max Christie and a 2029 Laker pick here. That's the cautionary tale as far as solid management, consistency as far as what the plan is going to be, and the plan that you thought was in place with Nico now all of a sudden has changed. So that's every trade there is a risk reward. Every trade has a huge a risk to it. Of course, this one, probably, as risky as any trade that we've seen in a long time.
And last one, we'll get you out on this one because a lot of folks have looked at the sunk cost, if you will, with moving on from Luka Doncic and having Anthony Davis and what that means going forward. Yeah. If you're the Mavericks front office, you can't necessarily look at it that particular way in terms of what you got from Luka Doncic. You have to look at it in the context of, this is what we need to do for Anthony Davis to be able to get ourselves in the right position. Is that the way that you would look at this based off of what's happened?
It is. I think you get in trouble when you look in the past and say, like, this is what happened and this is what we gave up and this is the trade that got us here. I think you have to look full speed ahead and say, okay, how are we going to get better as a roster? What gives us the most flexibility moving forward? Maybe we thought we could have gotten 2 or 3 first-round picks for AD, and I think you have to shift gears. And as far as saying as I said, what's the best deal, whether it be something at the deadline where we're basically getting off his money, or do we think holding on to him in the summer makes more sense here? But I do think you can't look back as far as what happened almost a year ago. You do have to look ahead with what you can do here.
Bobby, this was tremendous stuff as always. We really appreciate your insights.
We're Stein, man. We're like, listen, we're
he's running from you.
This time he's ducking you from overseas. This time he's ducking you from overseas.
Vacation in another land.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll make sure you call him and text him and tell him to get him on the show the next time that you're on with us.
I will. Thanks, guys. Always appreciate coming on with you guys.
Thank you so much, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby.